changed a little bit lately, and I hope I'm part of that change. But it is. I've been doing this for a long time, and my projects tend to always have been conceptual in design, but it was very difficult for me. And this is personal stuff, other things that happened, the environment at the time, which was lasted for like decades, was not really they were not into that. They were not into that idea. You know, it's one thing to be able to write about Black characters in science fiction and speculative scenarios. It's another thing to show it.
Right.
So obviously, thank God to Jordan Peele, bless the man, blessings to Ron Coogler, because they really opened up the floodgates for us and they allowed us to be able to work on a world stage. So Maddie's Rocket, I was out of the comic industry from about 1999 when the industry crashed during the 90s. I worked for Marvel and did that whole thing, unpublished work. Like there's this amazing Dr. Dre just had a brain aneurysm. I'm like, yo, man, don't die yet. I want you to be okay because I have this full published, this fully completed graphic novel that I did based on him. It was never printed, called Dr. Dre Man with a Cold, Cold Heart for Marvel Music. And I want him to be okay because I want him to see it, and so that's what my career has been. But as I began to adjust and the world began to kind of catch up, in 2014, I made the decision to jump back into comics with our mutual friends, Stacey Robinson and John Jennings, the whole Black Kirby duo. And they came over to my studio and they encouraged me to get back in. It took about 2 agonizing days to make the jump from animation back to comics. And I guess that was 2014. By January of 2015, Maddie's Rocket, the floppy one, was out. And there we go. That's what happened. And all of that has led to Infinitum being coming out now.
Hmm. And so what? How would you describe? How would you describe Maddie's Rocket? What would you say was the elevator pitch for
that? Take the cast of Stormy Weather.
Okay.
Put it in a Buck Rogers, Flash Gordon Republic serial, and make Lena Horne the main character. That's Maddie's Rocket. Literally, that is Maddie's Rocket. I wanted to do something that my parents and my grandparents didn't have as young people. They did not see people who look like themselves, look like their parents in sci-fi scenarios. It's completely past. So that's the unique thing about the work that we're doing, is that because so much was left undone and unanalyzed, we kind of like have to work in the past, present, and future. That's one of the unique things, because futurism is generally about projecting what's coming in the future.
Right.
But because so much stuff was not done, we have to kind of like work backwards and forwards, tends to be the lot in life of most people of color in the Western world. You're kind of like working, you're trying to resolve tensions from the past and continue to live in the future while doing all this in the present. So it's fascinating.
So you went from Maddie's Rocket. I mean, what would you say are, so let me make sure I have the timeline right? Mm-hmm. So you had started Infinitum before Maddie's Rocket, right?
No, actually, I created Maddie's Rocket back in the late 90s.
You did? Okay.
Yes, and at the time it was called If God Was a Woman, and was pitched to Lou Stathis of Vertigo Comics, who showed some interest in it, and unfortunately he passed away. But by that time it was too late, because the entire industry had, nobody knew in 1999, 2000, 2001 if the comic book industry, the American comic book industry at least, would even be around.
Right.
And so by that point I had made the transition to video game industry. So although I have little pockets of work, my career, to be quite frank, is very uneven. because there's just not the infrastructure set up to even support that type of work. I think it was more certainly in the superhero genre. You had that,
Right.
when it comes to comics. That's why the guys from Milestones and Daoud, who I love dearly, were able to do their work because they were working within a genre that already had an undercore, an established undercore
Okay.
within it. But when you're starting to deal with this kind of, oh man, Parker's not going to die in Alien, he's going to live. That was hard. The guy at the end of Night of the Living Dead, he's not going to die, he's going to live. He's actually going to survive. That's a different thing. So I was, admittedly, my own issues as an artist, there's been years and years of struggle, but knowing that I'm called to do this work, for better or for worse. Frankly, it has not been the most smooth path, but it's the path, and here I am, a balding older black guy, still walking that path.
Well, and you also, I mean, something that's come up a lot is you taking steps to do everything yourself. And in previous conversations, you talked about what it means to have your own printer versus depending on someone else to print to print your books. Could you tell us a little bit about what were some of the key moments that moved you in that direction?
Well, I was doing Maddie's Rocket as floppies first. I think that's where we first had our first very, very long conversation. I'll never forget that
Right.
conversation. And I was always held captive by the timeline and deadlines of the printer, right? If you didn't get it in at this time, then they couldn't print and they wouldn't even deal with you after. So that was frustrating for me. But I kept doing it. I got through issue 1 and issue 2. And then I said, you know what? I leased a printer. And I set up in my studio. At the time, we were living at a different location. And I printed the damn thing myself. So this book here, literally, these pages are printed in the studio. The binding was done by this wonderful gentleman in Long Island, A Quick Bindery. I'll never forget because I had to take the first batch of what they call the guts of the book out through a graveyard covered in snow. So I had to take the Metro North out. I pulled everything because it's like I knew I had to do this, and I had done a lot of work for other people, and I knew I couldn't do that anymore. I was doing other people's work,
right?
Who I love dearly, all of them, but it's gotta. Are you here to draw other people's stories? Or are you here to draw your stories? And as I said, there's more behind than there is in front, and time is a wasting. What's that line from Shawshank Redemption? Get busy living or get busy dying. I figured, hey, let's start living. So that required certain decisions that at the time felt selfish.
Right.
But I know that if I had continued on the path I was going in, was really doing a lot of work for other people, Infinitum literally would not exist. Maddie's Rockin' wouldn't exist because I would have been on that path where your energies are dissipating towards other people, and that's fine. It's neither here or there. It's all good, but that's what I realized.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, it's got to be really interesting because as a reader, what we experience is Maddie's Rocket comes out, right? And Fielder, gosh, you've been doing it all. I mean, I you're one of the OGs of Afrofuturism.